back to the Button Tree Book Club. This week we are discussing Eve by Anna Carey. Eve is book one of a young adult dystopian fantasy trilogy. The story takes place in the year 2032. It's 15 years after a plague has wiped out pretty much the entire human race. I think it says 98% of the human race is now gone due to a plague. Great coincidence. I picked this at total random. Someone recommended this to me years ago. I think this book was written, let's see, this book was written back in 2010. It was written in 2010, long before what we're dealing with now, but it's about a plague that wipes out most of the human population. Fantastic first read, I know. So we're following the character Eve, who was born before the time of the plague. I think she's 3 or 4 at the time the plague starts. She loses everybody and is taken to a school. These schools are established during the plague to try to keep children safe and to try to help them survive through it. Now she's 18 years old and they're supposed to move on to the next stage, but she learns something really disturbing about the next stage, and that is that it's not like a college. Like, they give it sort of a college vibe, but it's really just a place to produce more children, is the nice way to put it. So after she learns that, she wants to escape because she doesn't want to pretty much be stuck just producing children to try to rebuild the population for society. So Eve is a character that she's top of her class, she's super smart, well, book smart, and she's pretty much proven that all of that means nothing when she's out in the wilderness, which is where she has to go to escape going to this disturbing form of breeding. So there's a lot of things that I liked about it. There's also a lot of things that kind of just said meh to me. This was definitely a book I would give maybe a 3-star, 2-star, kind of between 2 and 3. I was definitely pulled in enough to the plot, and I wanted to keep reading it. I'll give it that. I wanted to keep reading it. It was easy to read. It was a quick read. I like it sometimes when there's books where you don't have to read every single word, every single sentence to get all the details. You can kind of skim through and be like, okay, I got the gist, and it was still good. My favorite character was actually not Eve. There was, Arden was my favorite character. She's very in and out of the story, but she's kind of that sarcastic sidekick character in the story. And I think she kind of balanced out the character of Eve, who is very naive and knows nothing about the wilderness or what in the world she's doing once she's outside of school. Arden, I wish we could have had more of her, really. She was very, she kept things real, she was honest, but half the time she was out of the book for one reason or another, and I wanted her character there more. I think it was one of the best characters. This world, a world where 90% of the population is gone, it's gonna turn into a pretty brutal, chaotic world. And aspects of that really did make sense, and I think she captured that really well in Eve, and I got a good sense of what was happening in the world, what was going on. But I liked that, it is a young adult, so she didn't get into such graphic detail that I was like, oh, this is too much, I'm not someone who likes gore. I'm not someone who needs the nitty-gritty of what's happening when people go crazy and people are just doing what they have to do to survive, which is necessary in this world. I overall thought the plot was good, but by the time I got to the end of book 1, I was like, okay, that's a good place to stop. I didn't really feel a need to go on, because 1, I found that I could probably predict what was going to happen, and I'm like, I don't really want to read it. I can probably guess what's going to happen. Things that I felt were just kind of meh. It was very generic. It felt like an outline that needed more details. The schools were called schools. The plague is called the plague. I wanted those things to have names. I wanted to know more about what they were, give them something to make them more concretely part of this world, not just a generic dystopian, the world's falling apart world. I think there was also a lot of it that didn't feel believable at times. So this plague happened, I think it was 15, 16 years ago. There's still a lot of people that are more than 15, 16 years old. People that were adults, teenagers when this happened, and yet it seems like the entire world before the plague is just forgotten. All technology is gone, everything is gone, and it's just no one teaches about it. It's just gone, and it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, people aren't just gonna forget technology, like a television or a phone. In our society right now, those are very important things that we use every day, that even little kids use. they would know those things exist. It wouldn't just be foreign concepts never heard of. Also, just the system of society was very, like, it was like every type of government ever in existence was just thrown out the window. Like, it didn't matter anymore. We've got a king in here who has pretty much become like a dictator and has put the burden of repopulating and labor on the kids, and I don't think that seems very realistic. I think if you wanted the next generation, like, to be another generation, to rebuild the population, you would treat the people you need most with the most respect, the most kindness, the most, I don't know, priority. And instead they are the least important. They are treated with the least respect. They're treated like no more than animals for, like, science experiments. I mean, it's not exactly science experiments, but, like, they are becoming, like, the labor backbone of the new society, which is very, very small. There was also a romance in this story, which, in this kind of world, it seems so unnecessary. I mean, I guess if you want to put it in there, it felt forced and it felt cliche. It felt like, at times, she just wanted there to be a romance and just escape the dystopian world, but then they fell into all the cliches. Guy says the wrong thing, girl says the wrong thing, guy leaves at perfect time so something horrible can happen to Eve. Like, it was just, it felt like the outline of your classic dystopian or young adult literature, and it just left out some details so you could fill it in yourself. It was a very generic read. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't like it. It kind of just sits meh for me, but it's definitely, like, once I got to the end, I was like, I don't need to read anymore. My guess is that I could kind of say, like, the king's gonna be more involved, this new America, like, I'm sure we're gonna learn more about that, but I don't really want to. I didn't feel, by the end of it, I didn't feel pulled in and connected enough with the characters that, yes, I want to know what's gonna happen to them. I was just like, okay, this is a good stopping point. So, that's it for this week. We need to draw. What will we be reading next time? We need our wonderful, beautiful basket so that we can draw. Let's see. This week, or next week, I should say, we will be reading. Alright. We will be reading A Great and Terrible Beauty, Book 1 of the Gemma Doyle trilogy. It is a young adult fantasy series written by Libba Bray. Alright, I have here A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. It is book 1 of the Gemma Doyle trilogy, and I just want to give you a summary of what's to come. Gemma Doyle finds an icy reception at the Spence Academy in London, the boarding school to which she's sent after tragedy strikes her family in India. Lonely and guilt-ridden, Gemma taps into her power to attract the supernatural. Dark visions fill her mind that have an uncomfortable habit of coming true. Trying to survive at Spence, she becomes entangled with Felicity Worthington, leader of the school's most powerful clique, and discovers her own mother's connection to a shadowy group called the Order. Secrets haunt the halls at Spence with its mysterious burned-out East Wing, and after a diary lands in Gemma's hands, it leads her to a world she cannot fathom, one where her destiny waits if only she is brave enough to face it. A Great and Terrible Beauty is the first novel in the Gemma Doyle trilogy, a series that sets the standard for supernatural gothic fiction. It's a deliciously sweeping and haunting saga that won't let you go. So next week we will be discussing book 1 of the Gemma Doyle trilogy, A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. So I will see you next week for another Button Tree Book Club.